there's just no chance I can live up to that. Right off the bat, I think we should all become disappointed now. This is my coat. My mother last night on the phone said, "Are you going to wear a coat and tie?" And I said, "No." But I've been taking my coat everywhere. I haven't been wearing it recently because my wife at a thing I was doing on the radio said, "You look super uncomfortable. What's the matter with you?" And I said, "Nothing." And she goes, "Take off your coat." So I did. And so now I'm sort of its trusted companion. I bring it everywhere. I'm just going to put it here because I feel like you have to have a coat. You have to prove that you have one, but I'm not going to wear it. Thank you so much, Noreen, and everybody at the center for having me up here and for that incredible introduction. I'm completely astonished by this crowd. Thank you, everybody, for coming out on such a chilly day, and there's kind of like a gray dampness going on top of the coldness, and it also became March, and everybody is sort of ready. In North Carolina on Sunday night, I kid you not, it was 70 degrees, and we grilled in the backyard, and the kids were playing wiffle ball, and we knew that it was going to rain ice the next day, and I know that is also called sleet, but it was different. It was sort of like the weather kind of arrived all at once, and it went from 70 to raining kind of ice cubes out of the sky, sort of apocalyptically Old Testament style, like you shall be punished for grilling in the backyard in February. But anyway, thank you for coming out in this kind of violent return to winter. I'm going to read a couple of sections from this novel, but not from the beginning, so I sort of would like to set up this book just a little bit and then read those sections. And then indeed, as Noreen said, I think I'll talk a little bit about my journey from wherever I was to wherever this is. This sort of, I'm pretty sure this is the pinnacle of my life, all of you people here on purpose in New York City. I always write towards what I'm most afraid of. There are sort of two guiding principles. I'm a sort of obsessive. I like to get chew toys and worry them, and then I like to write towards what I'm afraid of. And so this novel, I began writing it in sort of 2009, 2010, as I was losing pretty dramatically a series of arguments with my wife about whether or not we would have children. And her position was, yes, we will. And my position was, I feel so strongly that that's going to cut fiercely into my ability to stay up late and watch the West Coast baseball game and download songs from the internet and sleep until 10 in the morning and eat whatever the hell cereal I want and, not worry about whether, my pants are folded and clean. And I went with arguments. I remember this one night where we were fighting, like fiercely fighting, and kind of I'm having that out-of-body experience where you can see yourself fighting, and you're like, don't do that, don't go with that. But I went with it. I was like, global warming and overpopulation, which are sound arguments, I think, in the moment, or actually, no, they're sound arguments on paper is what they are, but in the moment, in your den, they suck. And I could feel myself losing, and I actually slept out of our home that night in my writing shed in the backyard, where I was writing this book. But I knew I would lose. I sort of always wanted a 12-year-old out there in the future, like in, 12 years. But as it turns out, in order to have a 12-year-old in 12 years, you have to do the thing they warn you not to do in health class. And it does, in fact, work that way, young people, so be careful. And but it turns out that you cannot write a novel about a dude sitting in North Carolina or anywhere else freaking the hell out about trying to grow up and having a kid. There's no plot to sitting on the sofa and clicking channels and wondering which West Coast baseball game you can watch. And I used to be sort of super fiercely anti-plot until the first novel, actually. I had the bones of the first novel, all of the people who would be in it, but no plot. Absolutely nothing was happening. And my wife, who is much smarter and better at being a person than I am, wakes me up at 10 o'clock, pre-kids. Wakes me up at 10 o'clock in the morning and goes, "You've got to go across the street. They're auctioning the house off across the street." And I was like, yes. Because this is the kind of thing I love. I love these sort of tiny moments that reveal the exact way the sort of American experiment is crazy and we individually are crazy. And I go over there and they're auctioning off the whole house and the house, and like a barrel of shotgun shells and a barrel of sort of Field and Stream magazines, and then the house itself. And you realize, okay, plot. And she went to London for that January, and I sort of worshipped at the altar of old black and white cowboy movies and realized, okay, plot is the architecture upon which you can string everything else that you want to do. Like if what you really want to do is sit down at the desk and write pretty sentences, you still have to have something happening. And so if, sort of dude one comes to town and is like, "Hey, retired sheriff, sorry, I shot your dog and kind of kicked your ex-girlfriend in the shin, and I would like to meet you on the town square at noon," that begins a clock, right? That sort of starts that pushes the narrative energy of any given piece forward. So I had this kind of spiritual awakening at about the same time as I was reading the first paragraph of every single Raymond Carver story ever written and realizing, like, holy hell, the problem of the story arrives in the first paragraph every damn time, every single time. Perhaps I should quit holding the problem of the story until page 9. And so in this novel, though the seed of it is my fear of having children, or a general fear of having children, or a general fear that you're not allowed to say I'm afraid of having children, that there's this kind of culture in America of, at least if you're of a certain age, of like, you know, procreation, the musical, with like an exclamation point, and there's going to be a kick line, and everybody who's got kids is sort of wearing the kind of Bud Light induced mask that says it's 5:30 and I've been drinking since 4:30 or 3:30 and the kids are killing each other. And I swear to God, it's the best thing that's ever happened to us, because if I don't say that out loud, then it turns out that might not be true and we might have to die. But so, though the seed of that book is this, I felt like I wanted there to be something else happening, and I became obsessed with parking lot ice machines, which it strikes me that if you are a city dweller, you might not know about. But in the suburbs, there are these things that have begun springing up that are about half the size of a semi-trailer, and sit in the middle of a parking lot surrounded by concrete posts, and they say on the side of them, "Twice the ice." And there's like a self-satisfied cartoon penguin sitting on the side. And the deal is this. The deal is this: you put in your money, and out of the thing, out of this machine, no attendant, no nothing, just like 11 quarters, and out of it comes like 20 pounds of ice. Twice as much ice as you would get at a gas station. That's the gig, right? And so they're just, it's like sitting there. And I live in Greensboro, North Carolina, which is like 3 hours from a mountain and 3 hours from an ocean, and there is no river. So there's like, you're never going to be sort of having a great outdoorsy time and have an impulse ice purchasing thought. And so I became obsessed with these, and I looked them up on the internet, and they cost $100,000 a piece, and it says on their website that they will pay for themselves in 3 years, and the ice costs $1.75, and I've done the math, and it's not possible, right? Something's wrong. And so I'm also this guy. I will write towards what I'm afraid of, and I'm also, instead of going to therapy, I just decide it's work, and so I'm going to sit in front of an ice machine and be like, I love this. Why do I love this so much? It doesn't matter. Let's call it work. We'll call it tax deductible, and we'll just sort of move along. And so I began wondering sort of who would have these ice machines, and in this way the novel sort of began to form. And so the present moment for the novel, the way the novel opens, is that Walter, who's the main character, has agreed to have a child without quite agreeing to want to have a child, which when I was writing the book, I would tell our friends at parties, I would be like, it's fiction, it's totally fiction, and my wife would kick me in the shins, and we would go home and do the kind of orbit of apology, or I would do the orbit of apology, and she would do the orbit of standing there with her arms crossed and being like, you said you would be on board. And so he and his wife moved to Florida. He loses his job in the banking crisis, because I thought it would be interesting. His fear is that if he's going to have a kid, his life will evaporate. I thought it would be interesting to have his life actually evaporate. The sort of the notion that, you know, if you think you have your life set up one way and then everything kind of slides out from underneath you, you have to wake up on Tuesday morning a sort of different person. So they move to Florida, and they move into a beachfront condo that his brother-in-law's family owns, and he goes to work for his brother-in-law, Mid, who is this dude who owns these ice machines and owns pizza parlors where they may or may not be dealing pot out of the back, and Mid may or may not be involved in a sort of illegal black market saffron scheme, because what's better than black market saffron? And Mid, the sort of last few pieces of information, I'm so nervous about this kind of thing, I would much rather read. Like, I'm a sort of quiet, shy, afraid novelist. I'd rather be at the desk than anywhere else. The last pieces of information you need is that Mid has these 4 daughters, and so he kind of represents the world that Walter is falling into. They've got a 15-year-old named Olivia, but who started going by Delton, because Middleton is Mid's last name. He's this guy, Mid Middleton, who's actually, that's the exact name of my wife's former hairstylist's husband. She comes home, she's like, Darlene's husband is named Mid Middleton. I was like, he is not. That's the best. Because why would you do that to yourself? It's, you know, old college nickname. How can you take yourself seriously? Forgive me if you're a sort of last namer out there. If your name is like Reynolds-Reynolds, I've already offended you, so it's over. But, So he has this daughter, Delton, who's 15, and kind of becomes the future Walter fears more than anything. But she's smart and kind, and so she's also sort of the daughter he hopes like hell he gets to have. And then they've got these two twin daughters, Sophie and Jane, who are 12, and then they have this 3-year-old Maggie, who is a complete oops. Again, health class, be careful. And then the only other thing I think you need to know is that Mid has been kicked out of his house. And right before this first scene starts, he's rung the doorbell at Walter's condo and sort of said, I've been kicked out of the house. And he's been kicked out of the house for indiscretions, not of the romantic kind, so I think we can sort of still like him, or we can still appreciate or respect him a little bit. But still, we don't really want to be married to him because he owns the ice machines and the pot out of the pizza restaurant, the 17 other things. Okay, that's the longest sort of preamble of all time. I'm so sorry. Delton, the 15-year-old, was in the parking lot at the grocery. We passed her coming in. Jesus Christ in a rayon tracksuit, Mid said. Another country heard from. He cut a long loop around a row of parked cars, brought the Camaro back to where she was standing with a few other kids, all of them smoking cigarettes. She'd seen us the first time by. There wasn't any mistaking that car, a yellow, late 90s Camaro. When she flicked her cigarette away, it was more show than any attempt to cover up what she'd been doing. Mid shut the headlights off so he wouldn't blind them. The kids stared at us. They were bored. Not caught. Not afraid. Just bored. See, Mid said, this is what I'm talking about. She doesn't give a shit about anything. Sure she does, I said. She doesn't give a shit about me. We've asked her not to smoke. Kids smoke, I said. At least she's not driving. We asked her not to smoke until she was 18. That's the kind of fuckwad compromise you end up making. The other night, I said, Alice said she'd have her on the pill. It was out of my mouth before I even tried to think it through. She is on the pill. She is? Sure, man, you think we're idiots? He left the motor running, got out of the car, and walked over to Delton. He didn't yell. He put his hands in his pockets, stood there, and fathered. He'd gone to jail. He'd been kicked out of his own house. He was in search of ice cream. He asked her a couple of questions, and she shook her head no to each one. She had a new haircut, one side longer than the other. It suited her. She had on that same long-sleeve band t-shirt again, only this time with a pink ballet skirt. She was cute. Not homecoming queen cute, but you could tell she wasn't going for that. Mainly what she looked like was a kid playing dress-up, trying to play at being grown-up. And who could blame her? That was give or take what any of us were doing. Mid asked another question, and she nodded yes this time, leaned into the car they were standing around, came back out with her purse. They walked back toward me, and Mid opened the driver's side door, folded the seat forward. She got in. She reeked of smoke. Walter, she said in a fake deep voice. How goes? Delton, it goes. Father has suggested I tag along with you two for a while, instead of hanging out with my miscreant friends. Fabulous, I said. Isn't it? Mid drove us over a few rows, found a space by the door. He parked and we sat there, the grocery glowing out into the lot. I hadn't seen Delton since she spent the night in the condo. From the back seat, I heard the scrape and flash of a lighter. Come on, Liv, Mid said. At least don't smoke in the goddamn car. Delton took a long drag and then knocked on the glass with one knuckle. These windows back here don't open or something, she said. Mid reached his hand back. She gave him the cigarette like it was a wad of gum. He rolled his window down, dropped it out, and almost immediately a pickup flashing green lights pulled up behind us, blocked us in. Security. Mid looked in the rear view. Give me a fucking break, he said. And Delton giggled. I wondered if maybe she'd been smoking more than cigarettes. A kid got out of the pickup, walked up to Mid's window. He said, "Excuse me, sir?" Mid said, "Yes." "I was just wanting to ask if this was your cigarette." Mid leaned out the window and looked at the ground. "It is not," he said. "I believe I just saw you drop it out of your window?" "Yes," Mid said. And that seemed to confuse things. The kid stood. We sat. It was a standoff. Then he noticed Delton. "Olivia?" he said. "Hi, Ellis." He looked back at Mid and me, frowning. "Is everything all right?" "This is my dad," she said, "and my Uncle Walter." "Oh," he said, clearly relaxing. "We weren't homicidal kidnappers. Probably." He reached his hand in. "I'm Ellis," he said. "Olivia and I had pre-cal together last spring." Mid shook his hand. "Ms. Newell," Delton said. "Remember how she wore that same sweater every day for 2 weeks?" Ellis said. "Yes," said Delton, but not really to him. It was pretty clear what the score was. Delton was several rungs up the social ladder from Ellis. They were math class friends, associates, out of math class. At the grocery store, say, with her jailbird dad, she wanted less to do with him. Ellis said, "You know what? How about I just pick this up this one time and we go about our business?" He was magnanimous, dauntless. He already had the cigarette in his hand. "Great," Dalton said. "Thank you," said Mid. "We're supposed to enforce the regulations," the kid said, by way of apology. "You know, rule of law, that kind of thing, society on the brink of collapse." "Wow," Mid said. "It's pretty serious business," he said. Mid said, "It will not happen again." "Olivia," Ellis said, "maybe I can text you?" "Maybe," she said. "Awesome," he said. He was wearing a white short-sleeve polo. He had acne. He had a blue baseball cap with the logo of the security company on it, a lock and a dog. Finally, he gave us what was probably supposed to be a wave, walked over to a trash can by the building, dropped the cigarette in, got back in his truck, and left. Mid tilted the rearview so he could see Dalton. "He seemed nice," he said. "Dad. He's got a job, tucks his shirt in, talks like a senator. Dad, seriously." We went inside the grocery. It was catastrophically well lit. The store was running some kind of promotion having to do with a new deli counter, which looked exactly like any other deli counter I'd ever seen, but they were excited about it. Had arches of red and orange balloons up everywhere in all the bright light, stations where free deli samples could be had. It seemed late at night to be having a deli party. Dalton broke away, started making a circuit of the samples. I hung back with Mid. We watched her eat turkey, sliced ham. "What did you say to her back there?" I asked him, in the parking lot. I told her we were getting ice cream. "She knows about you and Carolyn?" Everybody was right there when she went apeshit. "But why'd she want to come with us?" I told her we were going to a party at my buddy's place on the beach. I said she could come. "We're going to a party?" I said. "It's one of the kids at the kayak place. Me kayak, C kayak. It's his parents' place. They're in Europe for the summer. That's where I'm staying. Only he's having a thing tonight, a few people, low-key." "You're taking her to a house party on the beach?" "We are. I wasn't sure what else to do." I said, "How about let her smoke in the parking lot with her friends?" "You know," he said, "that didn't really cross my mind." We went to look for ice cream. Mid chose chocolate. I got a thing of rum raisin. When we got back to the deli, there was a pirate in full garb doing a magic trick for Dalton. He was floating a small table a couple feet in the air, lighting a candle on it, saying something into a headset about a lovely dinner for two. "Now I'm going to turn this over to you," he was saying to Dalton. "You're going to fly the table, little miss." The tablecloth had some kind of wire rigged into it so that he could do what he was doing, which was to hang on to the corners magic carpet style and act like he was the only thing keeping all of it from zipping over to frozen foods. The table danced in the air. It was a medium good trick, a step or two up from what you could get at a toy store in the mall. Dalton was shaking her head, was saying she didn't want to fly the table. "No, thank you," she said. "Come on, baby," the pirate said into the microphone. "I don't think I love the tone of his voice," said Mid. "Let's everybody gather around and watch the pretty girl do some magic, all courtesy of Slice Right Premium Select Meats and Cheeses," said the pirate. "Watch the little lady amaze us." The pirate had a peg leg, obviously fake, obviously plastic. I had no idea what a pirate might have to do with meat and cheese, or magic tricks. Then the pirate was somehow touching Dalton on her right hip, right about where her t-shirt didn't quite meet her skirt, and she shoved him, hard, back through a prize wheel that was set up behind him, orange and black and red pie wedges of various discounts and 2-for-1 offers from the deli. The pirate went down, and the prize wheel and the magic table and a stand speaker hooked up to the microphone went down with him. It made a hell of a noise. He was back up in a hurry, one bare leg sticking out from his costume. "Fuck you, you little bitch," he said into the mic, and that went out over the speakers. He took a step in Dalton's direction. Mid started towards both of them at a jog. We'd both just been standing there. But Dalton was fine on her own. She stepped crisply to the side and pushed a wire rack of bread at the pirate, baguettes and ciabattas, and he slipped and went down again, this time cracking his head pretty hard on the floor. He stayed down. Dalton turned and saw Mid coming for her. She looked like she might take him out too, that or start crying, but she didn't do either. She stood still. The pirate groaned. There were store people moving our way, deli employees, and customers standing around like they'd witnessed a crime, which maybe they had. Mid got Dalton by the arm, walked her past me, saying, "We don't need to hang around for this." We took our ice cream through one of those do-it-yourself checkouts, and Mid gave the woman supervising the computers $10, made some kind of gesture that I took to mean we weren't going to be waiting for change. The pirate said "cunt" into the microphone. People stared. Mid jogged Dalton into the parking lot. He already had the car started by the time I got in. Ellis pulled up to the front of the store in his security pickup, green lights flashing. "Go," Dalton said. "Please." Mid clipped a card on his way out of the lot. He said, "That'll leave a mark." "You'd be surprised," Delton said from the back seat, not in a faked voice, but not in her real voice either. She sounded about how you'd sound if the deli pirate had just tried to feel you up. I hurt for her. I didn't know how or whether to say so. Mid turned right, out from under a no turn on red sign, aimed us back toward the beach. He drove the speed limit, kept trying to check on Delton in the rear view without her catching him. None of us talked. The car rumbled below us. The radio played. We listened to the DJ tell us what had just been on and what was coming up next. So there's this other little section. What happens after that moment is that they do in fact go to the party, and Delton falls in love with this boy, Nicodemus, who's chasing his dog down the beach. Like, he's this kind of shirtless surfer dude who emerges from a house chasing a dog, and sort of everybody falls in love with him. Mid, Walter, Delton. You couldn't help but fall in love with a shirtless boy chasing a giant dog down the beach, and that is what happens. And other things occur, and then Walter and Mid are sort of driving around, and they see this thing, which is coming up here in this next section. And I think I forgot to tell you before, Mid has in fact gone to jail. In fact, the police have arrested him for either selling or not selling pot out of the back of his pizza shop. And I am pretty sure those are all the things you need to know. I told you about the twice the ices, right? That didn't just happen in my head. Believe me that these exist. Okay? Please believe me that these things exist, that there's this sort of sprawling suburban catastrophe all over North Carolina where every exit is the same, and sort of back behind the Target and the whatever else is the kind of secondary sad strip center in which there is the twice the ice, alone, no one ever purchasing ice, silently laundering money for someone somewhere. All right? The first twice the ice worked like a dream. You shoved in your 7 quarters, chose between the buttons that said bag and bulk, and you either caught your bag or shoved your cooler under, depending. 16 pounds of glistening, frozen solid ice, delivered instantly while you stood there in the sanctified glow of the very future itself. Mid and I each probably bought $20 of ice the first day we had the thing up and running. We gave bags away for free to anybody who came up to see what was going on. Public relations, Mid said. Marketing, grand opening. We gave bag after bag to people who weren't prepared to take them, who put them sweating and melting into their trunks, down onto their floorboards. Mid said the thing about it being twice the ice was that even if they lived a long way away, they still had an even chance of there being a regular amount of ice left by the time they got it. People seem to appreciate that line of reasoning. Mid handed out business cards with the 2 locations of the twice the ices listed. Twice the ice. The second twice the ice made only very cold water, which was a problem. You put your quarters in and the building gave off a groan like it was trying to work, like it wanted to, but then out of the bulk chute came a pretty steady stream of water, and out of the bag chute came an empty bag. Mid fed 5 rounds of quarters in and got the same thing each time, empty bag, water on the ground. And then he was on the phone to the home office, and they were telling him they'd have somebody out by the end of the week, Monday at the latest. We went by a few days later, and Mid had gotten a banner made that said, "Coming soon." It was hanging across the front of the trailer. "Twice as soon," I said. "No," he said. "No what?" "Just no." Mid was still sleeping at the beach house, but he and Carolyn and the kids had started eating dinner again as a family. Carolyn's idea, he said, which he was taking as a good sign. He was thinking he'd be back home in a couple of days. Alice was telling me over our own quiet dinners that she thought it would be a little longer than that. Still, he seemed better, seemed pasted back together reasonably well. This was perhaps Mid not on the very edge of the precipice or of prison. This was Mid with half his twice the ices up and running. We wrote down A1A, him telling me what they'd done the night before, how he'd dragged the kettle grill into the yard and done a whole turkey, how the twins had ended up fighting over the wishbone. They fight about everything lately, he said. They fight about fighting. We passed a stuccoed church that had a yellow fire engine parked out on the lawn, lights turning, teenagers all over it holding poster boards that said "Pray and Wash." "That seems unlikely," Mid said. "What was that?" I said. "If we're supposed to believe the signs," he said, turning around in a gas station, "it's a pray and wash." "I don't think I get it." "I think it's self-explanatory," he said, and pulled us into the turning lane, setting the blinker. "Mid, don't do this." He said, "What's the worst that can happen?" I said, "We get raptured?" "I think that happens differently," he said, and eased us through an opening in the traffic, but I would have to look it up. The kids on the fire engine waved us in. "This thing could use a wax and polish anyway," he said. "The sign didn't say wax and polish," I said. He said, "Maybe we'll get lucky." We got in line behind a red minivan. A boy, maybe 16 or 17, had his forehead pressed against the van door, and he had his hand in through the open window. He was praying with whoever was driving. The windows were tinted, so beyond a postcard-sized movie that was playing on a drop-down screen in the back seat, we couldn't see much. The movie had geese in it, flying by in V's. On the ground, there were people watching the geese. There was a girl. All this was taking place somewhere very green. The kid finished his prayer and sent the van over to a Quonset hut that looked like it was probably the meeting house for the youth group. Several kids in ponchos and modest-length shorts were soaping and rinsing down cars. The prayer kid signaled us forward, and Mid rolled down his window. "Hey," the kid said. He had a plain kind of good looks, like somebody in an orange juice commercial. "Are you guys feeling full of the Spirit today?" "We are," said Mid. "That's terrific," the kid said. "I'm Jason." Mid said, and he took my hand. "This is Walter." "Peace, Walter," Jason said, and I nodded. Mid did not let go of my hand. Jason said, "What would you guys like to ask God's guidance in today?" "We could use some technical assistance," Mid said. "For one thing, I've got an ice machine that won't make any ice." "Okay," said Jason. "Walter got the water hookups in just fine, so that can't be it. We're thinking it's something internal. Gears and wires, you know? It's a bitch. And so long as we're being honest, I got a little thing going with law enforcement that could use some oversight. Plus a domestic situation." "Wow," said Jason. "But more importantly, Walter's wife is pregnant." Mid held my hand tighter, held our two hands up in the air. "Things have been difficult," he said. "Wait," Jason said. "I think I know this one. What we could do is just ask for God's love to be brought more completely into your lives. How would that be?" "We were hoping you could do something about making it a boy," Mid said. "I think if he's got to have it, then he really wants a boy." "Mid," I said. "Walter," he said, "everything is going to be just fine." He turned back to Jason. "Right, Jason?" "Right," Jason told him. There were several things I could have done. I could have told Jason that there wasn't any point in praying for a boy, and that it didn't make any difference either way, regardless. I could have told Mid to stop fucking with the poor kid, to get us out of line and on with our afternoon. Instead, I said, "Can he be tall?" "And left-handed?" I'd never seen Mid so pleased. "Yes," he said, "left-handed is key, Jason. He'll be a hell of a lot easier for him to break into the majors. He can be a pitcher, middle-inning relief. He'll make us rich. We won't need any ice machines. If you can make him a left-handed reliever with a good breaking ball and a handlebar mustache, we can see what we can do about cutting you in on the deal." Jason said, "I don't think it would be right to ask for something like that." He said, "God has a plan for each of us." "I guess that could be true," Mid said, and sounded like he might be considering the possibility. "It is true," Jason said, warming up to what he knew. "He has a plan for each of us. Each of us is special in his eyes." "I have to say I sometimes don't feel all that special," Mid told him. "But you are," Jason said. "Each of us is so unique. That's what we all have in common." "Are you sure?" said Mid. "Pastor David says that each of us carries a toolbox of gifts." "A what?" "A toolbox," Jason said. "Each and every one of us possesses." Mid said, "Jason, Walt and I need to go speak with a gentleman about some rental villas he's building in a tidal swamp, so maybe we should just go ahead and get this taken care of. What do you say?" It was clear Jason wanted to push ahead with the toolbox, but he also had a kind of customer as always right thing going on, and the latter won the day. He took Mid's other hand. Mid was still holding mine. And without much more warning, he started praying for us. An overarching request for grace and mercy, and something about opening a door behind which there would be a light showing us the true and gentle nature of God's eternal might and glory. I had in mind a bare bulb hanging from a closet ceiling. Jason could have been praying for anybody. He did not mention giving my daughter a quick move to first, a workable knuckle curve. He moved along into some boilerplate about how abidingly good God was, about how he was so good, and ridiculous as it was there at the pray and wash, with Mid holding my hand and Jesus Christ's very own personal Tropicana spokesboy raining down favor upon us, there was an idea I felt come over me, a vague communion, a feeling that if something like the rapture or perhaps minor coastal flooding were to arrive right then, that we'd still be all right, at least in the short term. I was suddenly sure that we'd hash something out, Jason and Mid and me. We would triumph against long odds. The kid finished praying, and that passed, and I dropped back to my baseline reading, a kind of gentle, hazy panic. Though there was comfort in that, too, in drifting back to what I knew. Mid let go of my hand. Jason pulled his arm out of the Camaro, told us to shine, and sent us on to get hosed down. "That was nice," Mid said, while the rest of the youth group washed the car. "Probably I don't need that every day, but I'll take it." Comfort in panic. I'd felt it all along, since I'd stood in the kitchen flipping French toast while Alice went in the bathroom to pee into one of our juice glasses, afraid she wouldn't be able to go long enough to hold the stick in the stream right. She'd determined that dunking would be the superior method, and it was. It worked. I had the second sides browning when she made a little noise, a sound like she'd shut her finger in something not all that heavy, and I knew well before she came around the corner that the stick would have its 2 pink lines. "Are you happy?" she wanted to know. Sure I was. I flipped the toast. We ate breakfast and I got pretty convinced there was a hum in the room, that the house had developed some new vibraphonic frequency, that in time the harmonics would find their way to the exact right pitch and point to shake us all to dust. I made more French toast. Alice sat at the table, pregnant. The hum set in. What surprised me was that I'd come in a way to like the hum, or at least to recognize it, to reach for it first thing in the morning. Our daughter, Hall of Fame relief pitcher Raleigh Fingers, was just out there, waiting, getting ready in the bullpen. And I knew what that was. I had an idea. The books told us how to measure. The fetus was the size of a paperclip, then a damson plum. I did not know what a damson plum was, but I could guess. That was not the problem. It was the after that was the problem, that seemed so unimaginable. No amount of praying and washing could get you ready. The youth groupers soaped us, rinsed us down, buffed us dry with a Superman towel. Mid thanked them and passed $10 through the window. The kids told us to be careful as we entered the mission field, and Mid told them we'd do what we could. We pulled back out around the circle drive, waited at the road. The sun shone down clean and bright. The hood gleamed. Mid flipped the visor down on his side. A light blue scooter went by in front of us, hugged up against the curb, close enough that we could have nosed out and knocked it over. It was the boy from the other night, from the beach, Nicodemus, and there was Delton, riding behind, wearing no helmet, arms wrapped around him, hands on his chest, hair blowing in the wind. "Well, hell on a cracker," Mid said. "On a scooter," I said. They disappeared around a curve. I said, "That's that kid." He said, "Yeah." "How old is he?" Mid said, "He's 19. 19, I said. "Believe me," he said, "I know." "Is that even legal?" "Doesn't seem to matter so much," he said. "Doesn't matter how?" "He calls, he comes by, and that was her on the back of that thing." I said, "It was." "Is he a nice kid at least?" I said. "He seems like it, I guess. She's seen him every day since that party. He's supposed to come by for dinner one of these nights, show us what a fine, upstanding young man he is. She wants us to get to know him." 19, I said. "He's probably getting ready to enter her mission field," Mid said. "Mid," I said. "Or maybe not. I can't really tell. When we ask her how it's going, she says they're friends." He leaned back against the headrest. "I've been meaning to have a talk with her," he said. "You know, another talk. We've had D-talk with her. There's one you can look forward to." "Sometimes," I said, "when mommies and daddies love each other very much." He said, "It's just lately I've been thinking another talk might be good. I could say something about making sure the kid's literate, that he's kind, that sort of thing." That sounds... But I'm trying to decide. So I go on and do that. Buy her a frozen yogurt and sit her down. Will she then determine that I'm some kind of world-class jackass and end up on the back of a 45-year-old pedophile's Harley instead of on a mainly harmless college kid's Vespa? "It's hard to say," I said. "Kid can't be all bad if he drives a powder blue Vespa, right?" "Probably not," I said. "So maybe this is one of those times where you cut your losses," is what I've been thinking. "I don't really know anything about this," I said, thinking no advice was better than bad. And he said, "It is a cosmic fucking secret is what it is." The way she'd been hanging on to him didn't look at all like the way you'd hang on to a friend, but I did not say so. The hum picked up, got a little louder. A good part of me wanted to get back in line, wait for Jason, pray for those same things all over again, except harder. But somebody else who'd been prayed and washed drove up behind us, hit the horn, and that was it. Mid snapped to, pulled us out onto the road, drove us away in the opposite direction from where Nick and Delton had been headed. You guys are so nice. Seriously, thank you so much for coming out, and thank you for hanging out for this. vision of the universe is shifted sort of off its axis just a little bit by this. I'm really overwhelmed by your kindness and by you coming out. So real quickly, just to address what Noreen said, and then I can throw it up to questions, and this can be more about you than about me. My path to writing is this. I got to register early for classes as an undergraduate at the University of Georgia one year back in the dark ages when you used to have to pass an actual slip of paper through like a slot in a cinder block wall, and a secret gnome behind that would take it and walk over to, I guess, like a sort of panoply of dragons who would determine whether or not you could take your classes, and then they would come back and they would say you can take these two but not this other one. But I got to register early, so that did not happen, so I signed up for creative writing and golf. And I think I suck a little bit at both of them, but I sucked at golf more. And I had also never felt at home in the way that I had felt at home in that first class. My first creative writing teacher was Coleman Barks, who was not yet mega famous for his Rumi translations, but who now is mega famous for his Rumi translations. And I love him with my whole soul, and I would say this if he was standing next to me. He is a crazy man. He's like a cartoon of himself. He's got a pipe in his pocket that would kind of smoke during class, and like owls in his beard, and he would crash these library books down on the table and go, "Here's today's scripture reading," and read like God only knows what, Jane Kenyon. And I was like, wait, you can do this on purpose? But it was too late for me to major in creative writing because I had to graduate early to chase my ex-girlfriend to Boston and solidify the X-ness of that, which I did. But during that solidification, I also quit all of my reasonably well-paying jobs because I wanted to be writing, and so my roommates gave me the front porch of this 3-bedroom house in Newton, Massachusetts that we were paying an ungodly amount of money for. And that was so cold that I had to wear like a jacket, and I actually did the thing where you cut the tips of your fingers off your gloves so I could type. And I had applied to grad school right out of college and didn't get in anywhere except for University of Alaska Fairbanks, and I was not brave enough to go, which I still regret. I mean, all of the great things that have happened to me would probably not have happened because I would have been in Fairbanks, like mushing. But I wish I had been that kid. I sort of always wish I was the kid who was brave enough to go to Fairbanks, but I didn't. And then I wrote all that year in Boston and applied all over again and got in several places and felt very lucky and landed at UNC Greensboro, where Coleman Barks had recommended initially that I go to study with these folks. And I found in Greensboro a kind of strange MFA program, which is that it's kind of anti-superstar. They sort of don't have space for that kind of thing. What they want is for you to be drinking beer on the porch on a Thursday. I want to say afternoon, but I'd be lying, midday. And what I discovered in that program is that they wanted, I felt even more at home. My first sort of party at that program, I was involved in a fight about Emily Dickinson on the porch, and I don't know shit about Emily Dickinson, but I was in it because that's the other side of the sort of crushing, crippling difficulty with my personality. And I thought, this is the best thing in the world. We're all going to stand around at a party and fight about poetry. And so, in the program, I learned at least as much outside of the classroom as I did in. I stayed in my same apartment even after I graduated. There's this sort of joke in Greensboro about the fictional Greensboro postdoc, where you kind of hang out and you graduate, and then outside of any kind of classroom environment where you're not getting paid any sort of assistantship or anything, you realize, like, I'm going to actually try to be a writer in the real world, which means I've got to pay the bills and make space to write. Which is what I encourage all of my students now. I teach in the undergraduate writing program at Elon in the middle of North Carolina, and all my kids want to get into MFA programs immediately out of school, and I always tell them, like, don't hurry. Go to Kansas City and be a bartender and get your heart broken in ways you could not imagine. Because a great thing about being 23 is being 23, and in fact, the difficulty of being 23 is the same. It is being 23, and really you should maybe concentrate on that year and sort of suck at being alive at age 23, and then at age 24, boy, are your poems going to be better. And then, I wrote and wrote and wrote. The first draft of the first novel, I got finished. My wife, who was then my girlfriend, though we'd been dating for 10 years, I was an idiot. We were married, I just didn't know it. Took me to dinner to celebrate that novel, and at dinner I felt like a fraud because I knew I was going to do what I did the next year, which was throw the discs, this is back when we had discs, and every printed piece of that book into the city bin, and it went away completely. Like, the whole thing was gone because I knew it was a failure. And then I rewrote it, I saved some of the characters from that, and then had I've been really lucky. I published a few pieces in some literary journals. I wrote a letter to an agent that said, I've published a few pieces in some literary journals. I hope I am not a hack. Please read this novel. And he wrote me back and said, okay. took the novel, sold it, and sold the second novel, and so like it feels. I unfortunately, Noreen, I might have nothing to say about this because it's stratospherically exciting to be in that place where you're selling a book, but then there is like that's a Tuesday, and then there's Wednesday. Where no one rings your doorbell to be like, holy shit, you sold a book, congratulations, we just wanted to stop by with these party hats and these and the trick is, and I actually don't want to take the wind out of anybody's sails, what I'm saying this for is this, you have to remember, I need to go back home after this amazing night and remember that I have to do the hard work of making a cup of coffee and going, I have this shed in the backyard, and like I have to do Thursday morning. I have to go write in the shed on Thursday morning and fix the scene that sucks and is not working, because primarily there's just you and the desk, right? I've had this experience twice now where my editor will call me, or I'll be interviewed about a book, or where I'll get to do something like this, and I remember, oh God, somebody read that book. Right, like, which is what I've wanted the whole time, is all you want is to publish a book so somebody will read it, but it's such an intimate experience, you at the desk, that you forget that anybody else is ever going to do it. So you live this bizarre bifurcated life where it's just you and just the book, and all you want in the world is to get it out there. And then it's out there and you freak the hell out because you're not really equipped for that kind of thing. But I wouldn't do anything, I can't do anything else. I'm not complete without writing, which is, Noreen said so many of you are here, applicants for the, I'm going to screw up the name of it, the Young Writers Grant, what is it called? Emerging Writers Grant, right. You want to be that person the whole time. Like I think you want to be an emerging writer the whole time so that you remember on Thursday, you still have to figure out that scene that's not working, right? Like you don't get to a place where you think like, okay, I'm all right. You know, still you're gonna have a thing that's not working. You're gonna have to do that sort of plain work. And here I'll just say this one last thing, and then we'll do questions. I love more than anything revision. The genius moment where you've printed out the first draft is great, but my God, the blank page sucks. And so at least if you have a broken scene, you have something to work on, and that feels so possible. And it feels less like you have to be a genius and more like you have something mechanical to solve. And I love that. It's a place of refuge for me. And I say that too because I know many of you in the room are writers. And if that helps you out, then, you know, at least there's that for you. Like if you have something to fix as opposed to something to make, you know, like you're some sort of demigod or half god, that thing's impossible because, you know, you're not. But if you have something to fix, you're in much better shape. So that's the trick. The end. I'm sorry, I've gone on forever. It's 10:45. Last call. So I'd be happy to take questions, or probably I've said everything there is to be said. I'll just hang out in this awkward pause for a moment. I love the awkward pause. Hi.
Hey, where'd you go with the name Nicodemus?
I wanted to be named something. I think that all 15-year-old boys you're in love with should be named Nicodemus. Right? Like, aren't they all? Everybody in this room can remember the first and last name of the person in their middle/high school yearbook, right? And it's that first and last name thing. I wanted that kind of. Susan Hallbeck. I broke up with her because she got a perm. I'm not proud of this. She then went on to become a cheerleader, and I went on to become me, and so she won. So Nicodemus.
How do you connect to your characters?
I think they start as being slivers of versions of me, the versions of me I fear exist, the people who I hope I'm not, or the people I could be if I was the people I definitely am. Like I was going to say the people I could be if I wasn't trying hard, but I'm not trying that hard, and I sort of suck at being a dad and suck at being a husband on a pretty regular basis, so I just write those suck days. And then, you know, but that, like, they can't, that would be sort of self-flagellating or masturbatory if they were all me and I was like, look at me. So they better become their own people pretty quickly or they're boring, because then they're all the same. So I feel like I'm in good shape when the characters are doing things on the page that I wasn't expecting. I always like that moment when you're not planning anymore, when you're just sort of trying to keep up, when it's a rock rolling down the hill.
You mentioned this thing about sort of the bifurcated life of being a writer and sort of balancing personal relationships with maybe taking the space you need to write. Do you feel like you learned anything about integrating those two things over time, or things that maybe when you were a younger writer were more difficult to separate?
I do miss my younger writer days because I could be a lot more selfish, right? Like I could go on a 40-day writing bender where you don't have to be responsible to your love life or your parenting life. So don't get married or have children. The end. Thank you so much. But in a way, I think being married, I'll talk about being married instead of having kids because, God, it's boring to talk about having kids, finally. Recognizing that you're in a serious relationship with somebody else means that you're giving of yourself for part of the day, right? And so if I'm going to be having a serious conversation over a glass of wine with my wife, then I should probably try to think about the book a little less, so you have to teach yourself to turn it on and turn it off, even though you're thinking about it all the time. I'm lucky we're both fiction writers, and so I'm sort of super married within the faith. But yeah, it's weird. You have a split personality. The book is always in your head, right? I mean, forever you're thinking about your characters, and then you have to go eat breakfast or pay the mortgage. And the guy on the other end of the phone, you're like, I'm sorry, my mortgage is late. Would you like to hear about the novel I'm writing? So you just learn to be sort of mildly mentally ill.
So you said that twice as ices exist. Are there actually pray and washes?
I saw a pray and wash in Indiana, and I was so delighted. I was delighted in the way, I'm so glad I get to say this out loud. I love Matthew McConaughey with my whole self. I love, when I'm sad, I like to remember that the movie Reign of Fire got made. And I like to, if you've not seen it, the premise is that fire-breathing dragons kill the world and Matthew McConaughey shirtless with a flaming bow and arrow saves us. And I like to think about the pitch meeting where you're like, I got an idea, right? So I was so delighted by the Oscar speech the other night. It's so rare that one's expectations get exceeded in all of the possible ways, but like he won, I was like, he did not. And then the speech, I was like, that is the best. But so the Twice the Ice, I feel that way about it too, and the Pray and Wash the same. I try to get, I think the way my brain works, or the thing that's wrong with me is I get delighted by these things. The guy who went for Red Bull into space and jumped out of a balloon last year, I could not stop thinking about it. I'm still thinking about it now. I really like when moments reveal exactly the way that people are crazy, all right? And so now we know everything about that guy. You're like, you're going to jump out of a hot air balloon from space on purpose. And we know everything about him, and we know everything about his wife or his significant other. She's the person who's dating the guy who will jump out of it. So the Pray and Wash, it reveals, like, that's the way they want to proselytize, right? It's this, so we're driving through Indiana, and there's this yellow fire truck, and all these modest wear teens like holding these poster boards like, come let us soap you down modestly while we pray for you. And I just loved it. I think, well, here the thing about that is I could sit at my desk for weeks and not think of anything better than the Pray and Wash. And so I end up realizing that my job is probably to be more of a thief than an inventor, that it's my job to find those things and hang on to them and then figure out a way to stitch them back into work. I mean, like, the world is a desperately crazy place, and so I just want to, like, steal the little pieces of it.
You spoke earlier about struggling with plot. What is your process with it? Do you start with a very specific outline, or do you allow for things to sort of go in random detours?
Now I just want to get things messed up as soon as possible. Like, I want an action to happen in a piece of writing that requires reaction on the part of the characters. That requires, like, you cannot let that go. And so Mid turns out to be a criminal in chapter 1 and goes to jail in chapter 2, and this job that Walter has moved down for is just evaporating, right? So he has to do something about it. What happens in the first book is that the narrator buys the house across the street at auction and comes home and he's like, I bought it, it's the same as our house, we'll renovate it and flip it, it'll be great. And the wife is like, I'm leaving you. And so things have to happen as a result of that. It is, I think a lot about, I don't watch a lot of TV anymore because my life is boring and diaper based. But I really love Frasier, and I love Frasier because it pays homage to all those old sitcoms, and this is also my way of justifying my own sort of guilty pleasures, which is you can learn a lot about plot from Hollywood or from Los Angeles. In every single serious sitcom, we sort of know who the characters are, but like as the credits are rolling, somebody walks in and is like, Frasier, I have tickets to the basketball game tonight, but we have to go to the opera, and also I'm in love with you. And so there's 19 things going on, and it's that sort of old Warner Brothers, one person is hiding behind this door, and I'm thinking of a Warner Brothers cartoon I can't quite reference where they're on the ship and Bugs Bunny and whoever are sort of running around. Once it's that messy, if that happens in the first 5 minutes, then you just are keeping up. And then you get to do the cool things, or the reason, like, then I get to do the things I took creative writing classes for when I was, all those years ago, which is I want to write pretty sentences. but no one cares if you write pretty sentences, it turns out, if things aren't happening.
I think we have time for one more question, and then I want to let people know there's wine in the back, and you're all going to buy at least one book.
We have got to get to the wine. This is so much less interesting than if we were doing this individually in small groups with wine, right? So before the last question, can I just say thank you again so much. I really appreciate y'all's time and your attention tonight. John.
Yeah.
Hi, John, my former student from 1,000 years ago, and all of the rest of you who came out who I know, thank you.
So you talked a lot about writing in your fears.
Yeah.
And, I don't know, it strikes me as really fascinating. I was thinking about 10 years ago this semester, a certain unnamed nonfiction writer was visiting our class, and she was incredibly dour and miserable looking in the way that she described her writing process. And I remember you saying, you know, it's a privilege to get to do what we do, even if it's hard. And
Yeah.
I guess I wonder, writing into your fears, how you mentioned it being therapy or kind of cathartic, but I wonder if it does at times take you into places that you don't come out laughing on the other side. The kind of silver lining of haha is actually really difficult to cope with.
Yeah, so great, I'll do this very quickly, and then we can go drink wine, I promise, because I'm sort of super long-form answer guy, for which I apologize for previous long answers. I am really interested in the places where comedy and tragedy intersect and where both responses are appropriate, right? And so if I can't laugh at my bullshit fear of being a father, or my bullshit fear of being a husband, or my general fear of being alive and conscious in the 21st century, which, like this week, you just watch the news, welcome to 1939, right? And I'm not saying that we should find ways to make jokes about a Russian incursion into the Ukraine, but we should find ways to complicate that emotional response. And so that's, I think, what I'm really interested in. And so this is sort of back to, like, if I can't find a way to complicate the emotional response to being a fear of a father, then I don't have a book, and it's just me being like, oh no, I'm scared. So that, like, it's sort of, that's my entrance, is, okay, so I'm terrified of that. Is there something else there? If there's not, I don't get to write about it. If there is, I want to see if there's something else to be said, or if it's, if that's decent ground to work. Thank you.